Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to this month's coffee chat. This is the month of February 2018, and we have a few people here. So we have Crypto Changements, who is currently having some connection issues, and hopefully we'll be able to talk to him later. Oh goodness, yeah. Hopefully we have issues with him. We have XMR Scott, who's here also, and we also have Howard. Do you want to just introduce yourselves real briefly, just so that everyone gets a feel of who you are, in case they don't know for some reason? Howard, you can go first. You're muted though, so unmute yourself and then. You're still muted.
All right, I guess I could go while I figure things out. Yeah, so I'm Scott. I've been with Monero community since roughly January of last year, give or take a month. And primarily right now, a lot of it's just been, strangely enough, just a lot of talking about privacy, Monero, like the giant infographic that I put up in my cube a while back. I've actually had a few talks with coworkers about Monero because of that, and yeah, right now just a lot of talks, and then trying to, when I have free time, help with the translation work team.
Which translation are you working on?
So right now it's the guides. I'm trying to make a more beginner friendly, like picture oriented guide because in theory, not everyone necessarily speaks English, so pictures are kind of more universal in that regard. But I contributed to the Japanese translation, so I think it was mostly done. I only contributed like 60 lines, so not too much. Which, speaking of which, I probably need to see if there's any new lines for the update coming up in March.
Awesome, cool. Yeah, I know that we're all looking forward to the latest GUI release, including all the new languages in there, because I know that there's a lot of work that's gone on the back end of that. So we're looking forward to it. Okay, Howard, your turn.
Hi, I'm Howard, and I've been, I'm primarily an open source developer, and I've been working on a bunch of little things around the Monero code base. I'm the author of LMDB, the database engine that Monero uses to store its blockchain. One of my ongoing projects right now is adding some enhancements to LMDB so that we can use it as an encrypted data store for the Monero wallet.
Awesome, cool. And I'm going to link for everyone that's watching the live stream the talk that you recently gave. Do you want to speak a little bit about how you chose what to speak about when you were discussing Monero to these at this technical conference?
Well, I was trying to give, a general overview of cryptocurrency because a lot of the larger software development community hasn't really been exposed to it yet. So that was the main thing. And then, I tried to base the talk in terms of Bitcoin because that would be the thing that people are most likely to be familiar with. And then from there, it was just a compare and contrast between Bitcoin and Monero to show, where Bitcoin falls short and where Monero identified their problems and solved them.
Yeah, I watched it. Did you end up watching it, XMR Scott? Or Scott?
No, I haven't seen it yet, so I'll probably watch it after this.
Yeah, I watched it. I think it was very well received in the community, or at least on Reddit. People seem to really like it. I'm glad that they were able to have a recording so that people can see it later. And I don't know, I just really enjoyed watching it. So I appreciate you taking your time to go speak about it at those conferences.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it was definitely well received in the conference. It was, one of the most heavily attended talks of the entire weekend. So yeah, I was pretty pleased with that.
Awesome. Okay. Let's see. Does anyone have anything interesting that they just want to talk about, I guess? Normally we have Ray here who keeps us on track or finds something that he's really passionate about. At the last community meeting, he discussed, this meeting was between these two talks. He discussed wanting to work on an open source push within the community so that people, to kind of reinforce what open source is really about. He discussed how he would like to take the Monero community work group and have one of their initiatives be reach out to other open source projects like Riot, like any other cryptocurrency projects or any other project that is open source and can really use the help, and just spend some time to contribute towards it. So that's kind of what Ray said. That's kind of his personal push within the community, from what I can tell, among others, of course, because he's a very busy person. And that's just something I found that was really cool, is that the intent is to make sure that people in the Monero community are giving back to open source, and just kind of familiar that we're just one player, just one project in the overall wider game. So that's pretty cool. And then Crypto Changements says that they have their internet connection up. So if you can unmute yourself, Crypto Changements. Okay, perfect. Does this work now? Can you try talking? We can't quite hear you. It's unfortunate. Can you check your recording settings?
What about now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
All right, nice. Sorry, I kind of missed a little bit. What's going on?
No, I was just finishing up talking about how Ray was working on open source, kind of like how we discussed during the last community meeting. He was trying to get people together to work on that. But it would be nice if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing with Monero right now.
All right, yeah. So I go online by Crypto Challenge months for Monero, and I've mostly known in the community for working on the Monero integrations project, which is basically open source web plugins for stuff like WooCommerce, Magento, all that. It's similar to Globy, but like not quite, if you know what I mean. And yeah, we just recently had a big update that should hopefully allow people to start actually using Monero as currency a lot easier now. So I also do some translations too, but that's a little less.
Yeah, can you speak a little bit about how you kind of came to join the Monero integrations project? Because I know that I think or at least around a year ago, Sirhak showed up as a community member who started working on some of these integrations, and you seemed to join along. So can you talk about how you got involved and what kind of motivated you to get more involved?
Yeah, so back at like kind of near the beginning of last year, 2017, I started getting more interested. I found Monero, started getting interested in it, and I wanted to get involved. Like I said, I do translations sometimes. So really what first got me involved in Monero when I wanted to kind of get more involved, well, first of all, I saw that it's a grassroots community, which is like a lot different from a lot of other more centralized projects. But I'm like, okay, I looked at the big C++ code base. I'm like, whoa, this is really complicated, you know? So I just messaged Ray, and he kind of got me set up with some of the Kovri translations for the site, which actually needs to be updated now. So I got to look at that. Yeah, and then when I saw later on with Sirhak, he kind of started, or I saw on Reddit, he posted that he wanted testers. So I started out just kind of testing, like, okay, here's something I could help out with, you know. And then as we found bugs, okay, I started like debugging and got more involved. And then eventually, as my kind of I started realizing like, okay, these features would be nice, and I talked to him, and I just kind of like started making pull requests and stuff like that. And then yeah, we started. Now we've been working together on that project for quite a while, and yeah.
Okay. For those who are unaware, can you talk about can you talk about what plugins that Monero Integrations provides and what you've kind of been in the process of working on?
Yeah. So for I don't know people that don't know, I guess there are all kinds of like content management systems that people who run eShops use. A lot of the most popular ones, like I mentioned, are like WooCommerce and WordPress, Magento. What is it? We're working on one for OpenCart. So this way, now there's all kinds of like plugins and stuff for these. Like you can download a plugin for PayPal, Stripe, all those major processors, right? So what we aim to do is basically set up like all you have to do is download this link or download this plugin, right? And then put in like your address and your view key to verify that transactions come through. And then from there, the merchant doesn't really have to do anything else. People will be able to see that you want to get that you can pay with Monero on that site, and then it'll show for people. They could once they pay with it, it acts just like any other payment processor, right? So then once the payment has been received and you can see it on the blockchain, then the merchant gets the message that everything's gone through. They can ship their product or whatever it is, and then that's that.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for your explanation. I know that some people they've at least heard of Globy before because there's been a lot of the press around
yeah.
Coral Reef and others. But it's also important to know that they don't have to go with this company if they want to accept Monero. They can use these open source plugins.
The kind of the goal is like that there's no middleman. With Globy, like they set everything up nice for you, and that's great for people that just that don't just want to be able to download this, and that's that. And we kind of aim to do that too, to an extent, but you still kind of have to know a little bit about like Monero with like what your view key is and all that. And with Globy, they're obviously their greatest kind of number one thing that we can't do is they're an actual payment processor. Like they will convert your Monero, like a BitPay, straight to USD or euros or whatever. Whereas us, there's no middleman. It goes straight to your wallet. That's that. And also, I think what kind of inspired Sirhack was like when this project first started, like Globy wasn't even really a thing, right? It was still Paybe in their private beta. So you had this Monero, which was like usable and you could use it peer-to-peer. But it was still like you have this currency, but like it's not really being used as currency that much. But now between Globy and Monero integrations, hopefully we'll see a lot more people actually using it.
Yeah. Thanks. So do you have anything else you want to speak up about Monero integrations, or would you like me to move on to another topic?
No, I think we're good now. You could probably.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions? Like these are just ones I had. Mostly, like I just wanted to learn about your motivations behind the project because you just kind of showed up and started going, and that's great. And I just wanted to learn more about that.
Yeah.
Okay. So we don't have Sarang here today, unlike last month, but they recently published, or at least the Stanford research team recently published on their website, a new version of the Bulletproofs research paper. And so this is really interesting just because it includes new ways for there to be faster verification times. So that's something to really look out for, and something that the gift that keeps on giving, bulletproofs, I guess, right? So that's awesome. I suppose in other news, let's see, let's sort here by the largest in the past month. What's been going on? That's moving closer to release. I'd make sure to read the dev logs. You don't need to be too technical to just want to look at the dev logs and see what is generally going on in development. But yeah, I guess one big thing since we talked about, we finally have an open source iOS wallet. I don't know if anyone that's really taken a deep dive into the code yet, but it's nice that we actually have a Monero dedicated iOS wallet for people to use. So there's both Cake Wallet and X Wallet. Cake Wallet has all their code open source now. They've been very communicative about the updates. It's pretty easy to use. X Wallets, I believe they still need to update their latest set of source code. So like what's on the source code page doesn't meet what they're actually running in their application versions. And I believe they're also reworking their actual payment sending system, or at least they said that they would, because there was a large criticism about how it sent funds. There were large privacy leaks. So I'm glad that they've at least come around to changing how they send transactions so that they're not compromising the entire network. Does anyone else have any comments about how this whole thing went down, and even other perspectives related to X Wallet, since we've kind of had this chaos go down in the past month? Is kind of a good way to say it.
I didn't want to comment directly on that, but just the notion of apps for iOS in general, and as you pointed out, the X Wallet source code that's been published doesn't match the binaries that they're currently providing on the App Store. One of the big issues going forward is there's actually no way to verify ever that the source code you see matches a binary that you got out of the App Store. And so personally, I myself, I'm not a fan of Apple or any of their products, but I see this is one of the key weaknesses in that whole Apple software ecosystem, where you never have any way to trust that the code you're running is what it claims to be.
Mm-hmm. So if someone had or at least in someone's model, they did not want to trust that the developer they didn't want to have the risk of the developer having different binaries on the App Store compared to GitHub or GitLab or wherever it might be stored. Is there some way for them to kind of have Apple developer status and then sideload an app? I know there's some discussion on Reddit about that.
Yeah, that's one possibility, but getting developer status isn't exactly something that just anybody can do. It's a tedious process, and unless you're actually competent enough to install the developer tools and actually run them, which is also not trivial, then that's really not an avenue a lot of people can pursue.
Okay, so it's like one of those options that no one will realistically use if they're going to use the wallet.
A very tiny minority might do it, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's unfortunate. Yeah, definitely a criticism of their entire ecosystem then.
Yeah.
I know with Monero, it's not, that's an Android wallet. It is on the Google Play Store, but it is not yet on F-Droid. So is that a current issue with Monero on the Google Play Store? Is there a way to verify that the binaries are the same on the Google Play Store, or is that only an option for F-Droid?
I think that's only an option for F-Droid. And so again, unless you compile it yourself, you aren't really sure at this point in time.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I will say, I know you can download APKs. I think either you can look at the move the APKs from your phone to your PC or directly download APKs from the Google Store and decompile them. Like it's super trivial now to just there's decompilers online. Look at the source code that way. It isn't necessarily going to be accurate because the compiler is probably going to optimize a few things and remove comments and so forth, I think. But I know I've done that for other applications in terms of looking at the source code. But yeah, so I think Android's a little bit better in that regard. I can't speak to Apple and how easy it is to decompile the actual binaries that Apple gives you. I feel like for Android it's a lot more, or it is easy, I should say.
Yeah, that's a good point. APK decompilers are pretty common, and I suppose if you're comfortable reading Java source code, you'd be all right because, as you mentioned, all of the variable names will be changed to just mechanically generated names. So you'd be comparing line by line, A1 to this is a long variable name. So some of it would be more or less straightforward to read, but overall you could get a good feel for what's going on. Yeah.
Okay. And then, so for most people who would have, or at least have the concern about the Google Play Store, the best method for these people, at least I assume, is just to build from source, get the APK, move it to their phone, and then install, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Instead of a roundabout verification, I assume. And luckily, that's not. I guess the advantage that Android has over Apple there is that you can do that without having some special status.
Yeah, I think that is an advantage, definitely. Yeah.
Well, with Apple, it is possible to, or if you, since I think Xcode 7 or something like that, just like Android, if you are competent enough to, like Howard said, to actually download the developer tools and everything, then you can just sideload it, similar to if you were to download like all the developer JDK and all that for Android. But with the caveat that you have to have a Mac. But yeah, really the only way you can verify is if you compile yourself.
Okay, yeah. We had a good question come in through chat here. They asked us to discuss where a situation where a high percentage of the total Monero mining strength comes from botnets, and this is something that's kind of been interesting to watch. Where I think there's a lot of confusion too, and a lot of people don't know, including probably us. But if you look at like the Monero hash charts, it's like 75% or more is in the unknown category, and does anyone have like a good answer for this? I mean, we know that botnets have really grown over the past few months, where people are using Monero. They're taking exploits in computers. They're running, instead of spam attacks or just straight up ransomware, they're just running a miner in the background, and they're using this to profit off a bunch of computers. What would really the process be towards finding a good estimate towards how much mining power is coming from these botnets?
I don't think that's a question you can answer. I mean, the reason that you see all of this mining power marked as unknown is exactly that, right? You can't distinguish a botnet node from a genuine solo miner. And if these botnets are all part of a private pool, okay, I suppose eventually you could stumble onto that pool and find out what's going on there. And I mean, I've seen some Reddit posts where someone has talked about, oh, thus and such mining pool is actually, 100% botnet nodes. But, if falling short of that, if you can't identify a pool that they're all talking to, you really can't tell that this is any different from a genuine solo miner.
I know that at least the Monero mining has received a lot a lot of attention from a lot of security researchers. When they look at the actual code where they're mining to, is it typically to a private pool? I know in the past it typically has been to a public pool. So is this a change that we're seeing?
That could be. And, at this point, it's, if you go to the trouble to set up a botnet, I think setting up your own private pool is not much more, and again, if you have that many nodes, why would you share it with anybody else in a public pool? Mm-hmm. So that makes more sense as the logical next step. But the other interesting point about all of this, okay, which I think a lot of people are missing, is the reason that botnets exist is because computer operating systems are insecure, and they have been for decades, right? We really have to view this as a good thing because it's drawing attention to a problem that's been there forever and that everybody has refused to address up till this point. And, so to focus on mining botnets and say, oh, Monero is bad because it's relying on all these things, the real underlying point should be computer operating systems are bad and need to be fixed. Okay, that's really the underlying point. And it is a good thing in a number of ways. As you mentioned before, these are computers that would have been vulnerable anyway. And they might be, if they weren't mining Monero, they would be sending out spam, or they'd be, overrun with ransomware or whatever else. Okay, so in most aspects, the fact that these botnets are mining Monero is actually the best possible thing they could be doing right now.
Yeah. That's I've been working a little bit with the malware response work group where we're working on getting resources on the actual Monero website for people to have some way to, or at least have some education in terms of how they can remove unwanted mining from their computers. And really, at the end of the day, it's like, well, your computer was compromised. If your computer did not have, back doors that can be used, apparently, then that's the whole reason that your system is vulnerable. And in most of the cases, it's just saying, well, what you should do is just wipe your computer and update to the latest version. It's really the ultimate response you have to give people. And I know it's kind of a hard sell, and I can at least see why they would be upset that someone's using Monero in this way. But you're right that it totally isn't it's not like Monero is going out and infecting computers. These computers are being left open. They're not being updated, but their security is not being updated, and then people are just taking advantage of that. And hopefully, it will encourage people to update faster. We'll see, though. I imagine there always will be people that don't update or neglect their systems. So,
yeah, that's the other danger is that people are so used to, for example, Windows sucking and their computers being slow all the time that they may not even notice that a miner has slowed it down even further. And I think that's probably the biggest danger now. And it's interesting also that, even if you aren't going to stay up to date with your patches, one of the easiest things you can do to prevent being taken over by a botnet is just to run your own miner, because then the botnet won't have any CPU left over to use for itself.
Okay, yes, the official Howard way. You just avoid botnets by running your own CPU miner.
It'll work.
That is one way. That is one way, I assume. Just like an arms race within your computer to who has priority over your CPU.
There we go. Exactly.
Yeah, and on that regard, I know there was recently, was it the Mirai botnet? There was some conflict where one botnet was basically overwriting another. So yeah, it's very much a case of botnets trying to fight for your system.
Yeah, see, if we were running a botnet, what we would do is we would infect these computers and then secure them so that no other botnet can infect
That's it.
If you're in it for the long game, you need to make sure that you're improving the security of the computers you're infecting, right? Yeah, that'd be funny. I'm sure that's the next step is, ironically, people improving the security of the computers they infect.
Hey, that would actually be a good, sales pitch, right? The new Monero anti-malware program.
Let's just use this malware to fix your computer from being vulnerable to malware. The next botnet that goes out to remove botnets.
Right. I think the ideas happened before.
Yeah. So I suppose to come a little bit back to like the bigger question about if we have a situation where people are able to control a large number, or at least a large amount of mining power, and it's hard to validate who is mining. At what point do you really become concerned that there are large players in the network that have control over a lot of the mining power?
I think if you are closely watching the network, probably the first time you will start seeing something weird or something to be concerned about is if you see average size transactions getting stuck in the transaction pool for longer than average times, because that might mean that somebody is preferentially mining specific transactions. Okay, and I think until you see that sort of thing happening, there's probably nothing, nothing nefarious going on.
Okay. I'm just trying to think of some ways where hopefully we can get some more information, like to get a better picture. And I know the whole intent is for it to be hard for you to figure that out. Like theoretically, someone could run a botnet and instead of using a mining pool, have all these computers solo mine.
Sure.
And then how would you really know how much hash power someone has and what computer is a botnet and which isn't? And that becomes even more difficult. Right?
Yeah, you're not going to know, even an estimate of how much hash power they have, but the goal of having all this hash power is to be able to control, to decide who gets mined when, right? So until you see unusual transaction confirmation times, you're not seeing anybody manipulate the network. Because the only thing that you can do to manipulate the network when you have that much hash power is to alter the order of transaction confirmations.
I understand how I understand that perspective. It's just, I suppose that's the only answer, is that you only know someone is capable of an attack if they're actively trying to attack. If someone is just passively sitting on a lot of mining power, you can try to have some indicators, but if they're smart, there should be no way to know.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to understand like the motivations of people running botnets as well. At least if their end goal is mining, they're not particularly concerned about being malicious usually. Or at least I would think they're more concerned about expanding their network and being able to mine more and basically gain more profits. They don't really care about maliciously manipulating transactions in theory.
Right.
Yeah, well, one concern I have is if we know that they're, first and foremost financially motivated. So if there is some financial gain for them to be able to manipulate some transactions, it might be possible to see that. Now, granted, at the same time, they'd be tipping their hand when they do that. So,
yeah, exactly.
It's.
I mean, they'd be tipping their hand, right?
Yeah, and as we said earlier, like there's multiple botnets. It's not primarily just one malicious actor out there. It's multiple trying to
Yeah,
build their own network to sell to people or mine or do whatever.
Yeah, I think the reassuring part is that other people are still normally mining, right? And second is that there are a lot of botnets.
Decentralized botnets.
There we go.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks to the chat for that question. I'm glad we had some conversation about that. I know it wasn't really a resolution, really, but the network is literally built so that you should not be able to know that info. So it's hard. I know. So for what it's worth, and we can all take this with a grain of salt. Fire Ice, who runs the XMR Stack miners, or created the XMR Stack miners, and receives income from people who donate when they run their mining systems. It's automatic. Ideally, if an attacker was smart, they would easily just change the source code, compile, and have nothing to do with this person. But he claims to have some info related to having a greater insider info compared to who's running their miners. But again, I think that's just remote. Like that's super speculative, and I don't know if there's any correlation there at all. Even. It's hard to say.
The thing is, like, if you're running a botnet, it shouldn't take you that much more time to just compile from source with that little piece of code taken out.
Yeah, especially if they're making a few extra percent. I would be surprised if botnets were not changing one line of code before compiling. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, anyone have something to talk about beyond mining? Crypto, so you speak with Sirhak a lot. I don't want you to necessarily speak for him, of course, but are you involved at all on the mastering Monero project?
Not really. I've taken a look at it and kind of done a little revision here and there, but nothing really major. Yeah, I mean, I've been talking to him about it, but it seems like it's really just he's really getting along, but he's gotten a lot out. I think it's all on Taiga, and maybe GitHub too. I'm not sure, but it's still kind of early. But there's a lot of stuff getting written. That's really all I can say. That's the extent that I'm involved.
Okay. Thanks. Okay. Let's see. Other cool things that are coming out. If you need a paper wallet, you no longer need to use the terrible quick design I pulled up. The Monero made some really good paper wallet designs. So I'll link those here, but in the chat. But yeah, they're very nice. And I know some people are or criticism of paper wallets is you don't want them to be flashy because you don't want to reveal that if you have Monero, you should put it on a very discrete piece of paper. And I think there's kind of two different cases for what type of paper wallet you would use. If you're trying to convince someone to get into Monero and want to give them a little bit of Monero and aren't really concerned about the security, so if you're giving someone $20 equivalent, let's say, I think it's super awesome to have one of these attractive stylish paper wallets to hand out to some people and get them excited. It's kind of like sets the first impression for people. And if you want to store it a large amount safely, I mean, then don't, write, my keys are here, right? They use the encryption tool, put the keys in different places. So I think there's definitely like two different use cases there. This is kind of like the Dogecoin approach where you just print like thousands of these things and just throw them around to people, hoping they'll get involved. It's like it's more of a marketing material than anything else. That's kind of how I see it. And I think it's a really good marketing material for getting people into the project. I especially like the orange. There's two designs there. I like both, but I definitely like the orange one just because it's like super modern and simple. Basically, the Monero makes some really great art, in case you haven't seen it all before. I'm sure everyone that I'm speaking with here, I'm just preaching to the choir because I'm sure that everyone here has already seen most of their stuff, but just wanted to highlight that again because it's nice. Has anyone here like given out paper wallets at events before or anything Monero related?
A year ago, or more than a year ago, I was handing out 5 Monero brass coins around Christmas time. And I certainly wouldn't be handing those out this Christmas.
A little too generous for you? Yeah. This isn't really Monero related, but for my student cryptocurrency group we had at the University of Minnesota, we had Stellar reach out to us. And they're like, as part of our fair distribution model, or whatever they call it, we're giving a certain amount of our coins out to nonprofit groups. And our group they just cold emailed us and they're like, would you like to receive coins? And so about a year ago, they gave each of the members 2,500 Stellar lumens, which at the time was about $5. Now it's over $1,000. So it's kind of funny when it's like a similar case. It's kind of funny where you give someone money in the past and it's small, but now it's like, oh, well, I wish I got that money in the past. That's just how it goes, I guess. But it's funny because like literally the day after we gave those out, the price peaked to about like $100, $150 per set of 2,500. And then we received a ton of emails like, oh, do you still have this giveaway? And we're like, nope, you should have gone to the meeting. Let's see, we were about 10 minutes left. Any other big changes on GitHub? Do we know when the actual code freeze is coming up? I know it's scheduled for like the next few weeks.
Yeah, it should be coming up really soon because I think we're targeting the point release, by the very beginning of March. So, yeah, really soon now.
Okay. Cool. One during the latest Monero skepticism thread, like sometimes they have good content, sometimes they sometimes don't have that great content. But I think last week, one person at least raised some really good issues where we don't have very good descriptions on how you can use Monero with certain very strict or very certain very strict thread models. Like we've discussed churning in the community, but we haven't really discussed like the impact or how you're really supposed to do it beyond what we have in that one GitHub issue. And so what are people's thoughts regarding coming up with like a best practice user guide? Because I think right now we just don't have that much research to at least point out why, like if you want to use Monero very, very securely, what are like the steps you can take? And we have those steps for how they can store a paper wallet or store like an offline cold storage. But do we have it such that, okay, when you're making transactions, you should, I don't know, I mean, run your own node, and like, what are the steps? Does anyone have thoughts over, like, does anyone think that that's lacking?
Well, yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, the churning, there really hasn't been enough research on how to churn effectively, all right? Or a lot of people have hypothesized strengths and weaknesses of churning, but nobody has done any simulations or measurements, to quantify exactly what the impacts are. Like I've heard, if you churn multiple times in rapid succession, that will be obvious based on timing, right? So there are things that may be bad, may be good, but nobody has actually put some hard numbers to them, right? So that's something that needs to happen. The Monero Research Lab already has their hands full doing other topics, so this is probably something for new people to get involved in.
Yeah, how would you even go about testing those sort of scenarios? How would you kind of frame the research to suggest certain things are better than others?
Probably, you're going to have to develop a kind of simulation model. When we looked at setting fee levels and output selection and all these other parameters that have been researched, we looked at transaction spend histories across the entire Bitcoin blockchain, as well as across the old Monero blockchain before Ring CT was deployed. So across when you could actually see amounts flying across the network. So you need some real data from real users, which we obtained by looking at the Bitcoin blockchain. And I guess there is no substitute for having good input data to model with.
Because I think we have the same argument, not even only for just churning, but also just coming to consensus on a certain ring size. Because do you agree with that or no?
Well, see, the problem with the whole ring size conversation is, it's, even if you set the ring size to 100 or whatever, some large number, what's really more important is how you chose the ring members, their distribution across time. And everything that, we model there can easily be,
Solve it.
right.
So that's something that's hard to deal with. And I think I feel like that's always going to be an issue.
But also, as you say, they don't solve it, but it's also not it's not a, it's not a certainty, right? Even with everything that all the analysis in the Monero link paper just gives you, at the end, you're left with a probability that's, less than 100%. So you never actually know exactly what's going on.
Yeah. You still have the deniability.
Yeah.
I'm just so, yeah. The issue with the whole selection, though, is I mean, there's always a chance of randomness. The whole point of why people are concerned about churning is, well, if you have these repeated patterns, the chance of this happening randomly with the code that's provided is very, very low compared to all the other outcomes. It's kind of like that. So it's possible, but it's hard.
Right.
The goal is to obviously make it so that even behavior outside of a certain narrow box is not unusual, or is still likely enough to not be unusual. So that's hard to do. Okay, so Rayrar, thanks for joining us. Thanks, Diego. You popped in the last second, right before we have to go.
I thought I thought it was an hour later, and so here I am at the end of this coffee chat, just to make sure that you guys get at least to see me, for all my fans out there.
No, it's definitely you're an essential part of the team, and I imagine many people are like, "Where's Diego?" We missed his talk about insert whatever you're interested about.
My Rayrar rant, TM.
Yeah, I spoke at the beginning a little bit about the community initiatives that you've had with trying to promote open source software outside of Monero.
Right, great. So you did.
Do you want to end us? Do you want to end us on that sort of topic?
Sure. I feel that it's easy to catch the Monero vision if you have already caught the open source vision, which is to freely give software. It's giving power back to the people. People are in open source for different reasons, but there's a community, there is a culture of giving freely your work, your time for the betterment of other people. And really that's kind of what Monero is all about. We are here to make a new financial system, a new financial way that people can do things, and we are giving it freely. And no ICO, none of that stuff. We're giving our time, we're volunteering and stuff. So Monero is very much at the heart of that open source vision. And one of the things I feel that Monero should be doing is building bridges of relationship with other open source projects that really take this pure open source vision to heart. And maybe they're not as big as Monero, maybe they're smaller, maybe they are bigger. There's other ones out there that really want to see the world improve. And Monero should be partnering with them. At the very least, Monero community should be supporting them, and because their vision aligns with ours, even if it's not in the financial realm or the privacy realm. As long as they're trying to flip something on its shoulders by giving power back to the people through software, we should be alongside that. And it builds bridges of relationship between the two projects where if we need something, maybe they can help. If they need something, maybe we can help. And that can be through money. That can be through getting them to accept Monero donations and then donating to them. That can be also through work. So, if you're a German translator and you've already translated everything that needs to be translated for Monero in German so far, great. Well, let's go to these other projects and see maybe they might need some translation. I make websites. Well, maybe these guys can use a better updated website. Stuff like that where we can help wherever we can to get these projects to further their vision, which is to give power back to people through software. And that's fantastic. And we should be alongside that. And it's a great shame that actually other projects, other cryptocurrency projects that do not share this vision are already hopping on board projects like these and supporting them. And it's just a real shame that they're doing this before we are. And we are not really doing this at all. And I just find that terribly, terribly sad. Monero owes a great debt to open source projects. As I was speaking with Arctic Mine, it's the idea that Monero is doing something great, but it is doing it on the shoulders of giants. And those giants that came before us are other great open source projects and open source as a whole. And Monero owes a debt to those people. And Monero owes a debt to those projects. Monero owes a debt to open source. And we need to pay it somehow. It's our responsibility, I think, and it's the right thing to do. So that's kind of where this initiative is coming from. Starting to compile lists, starting to look through different open source projects. So if you have any ideas, if you have any ones that you really, really like and you love their vision, you love their people, shoot me a message. I'm sure that many of you use different stuff. So that's kind of what that's about. Sorry to keep everyone past 10 for anyone that is still here. But hey, I'm not against this. We could go all night. Let's keep going.
All right. Yeah, thanks. I think that's really important. I know during the community meeting, you had overwhelmingly positive feedback. And that's something that at least and I assume many other people in the Monero community would really like to instill as a value of people who are involved with Monero, that it's not just a scheme for people to make money. It's not just a tool for botnets. It's it's a true community-led initiative to improve projects. And if they understand that related to other projects that also exist, that's a large positive win for the entire community. And not only just the Monero community, but hopefully the people with their perceptions on how the projects will change and the projects that we're helping. And it's like a massive win across the whole ecosystem, and hopefully brings more attention to open source. So I think that's really powerful. And I'm really glad that you brought that up in the community meeting, and that's something that you would really like to pursue. Just for the sake of time, does anyone else have anything that they would like to talk about? Crypto changements, Howard, Scott?
No, I'm pretty
Nope.
good.
Yeah, crypto changements, thanks so much for being here to shed light on kind of what you do
Yeah,
with
totally.
the Monero integrations part. That was really, I was happy to hear your perspective on that. Thank you.
Yeah,
And then
totally.
Howard, thanks as always. We appreciate your perspective on development and research and everything else. You're obviously a great asset to the community. We appreciate that.
HYC.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
And then Scott, thanks for joining us too. Keep up the work. Hopefully that we can get it compiled to work on the other operating systems as your project. And yeah, I really appreciate you having you on too. Thanks. Any other final words, Rayrar?
I could go on forever, as you know. But did this last question get answered? Any thoughts on trends in public perception of Monero?
No, we haven't talked about that. So if we want to end on that note, it sounds like a good way to end.
Sure. So, take home the final thoughts. Public perception of Monero. Monero is always, maybe not always, Monero will be fighting against the kind of criminality coin type thing, and you just really got to start to explain to people. As an example, yesterday, I live in a teeny tiny city, and I found a cryptocurrency investment meetup that goes on in my city, and there was 2 other people besides myself, and I went and I explained to them, Monero, anonymity, privacy, and fungibility. That's what it does. And they were like, oh, okay. They didn't. And I explained to them that anonymity is just merely a technical thing required to have fungibility. And that's how we got to shape the public perception of Monero. We're trying to have a great currency, maybe even one of the better currencies that exists in the world today. And so when people come in like, oh, isn't it that criminal coin? Education, and people will learn. And maybe they won't like it. Maybe they might think, I would rather have a good currency that doesn't have these troubles than a great one that does, which is a potentially valid viewpoint. But education, not shilling and stuff. But the public perception of Monero, it will change over time as we educate, similar to Bitcoin. And that should be it. That's it, people. Go home. It was a pleasure having you all here. Sorry I came so late.
No, we're always happy to have you on here. Yeah, I'd say luckily as the community grows, there's a far greater chance that the perception will increase, that Monero will be less associated with certain nefarious actions. If they're like, hey, I'm involved, I know, like I've taken a second to learn that these people truly care about open source, about contributing. This is a community-led initiative for benefits that have been, hopefully communicated effectively. And since I've now been exposed to this, I'm no longer at least perceiving Monero as a tool built for nefarious users. It's a tool built for everyone that unfortunately some nefarious users take advantage of, but really can provide large advantages for everyone. Education is really the number one reason there.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, just have to agree and reiterate all of that, because I mean that was the thrust of my talk at FOSDEM, and that's the message that really matters. Is we're trying to create a great currency, a great tool, and you can't have fungibility without the anonymity. That's it.
Can't have fungibility without fun.
Yeah, and I think just to add a little bit more, I think especially as we see like more and more people adopt all these cool things that people are developing for like point of sale systems, we're going to kind of see that fall away, because it's going to be more and more, the broader use cases are going to be for everyday point of sale transactions rather than, dark net markets. So, we still have to get there.
I agree with that, though. As it becomes easier to use, if people really wanted a nefarious purpose as their prime, like the botnet miners or botnet operators and malicious attackers are going to go through significant effort to infect machines. For instance, they're willing to put in that effort. Is a normal person willing to put a lot of effort in to make a transaction? It depends. Probably not, though. And so it's important to make it really easy. And so it's like, well, you can either use Bitcoin and have no privacy, or you can use Monero, which is ideally just as easy. Boom, works just as simply. Anyway, any last thoughts, or should we all say thanks to our viewers for listening to us? I believe 14 of you right now, 12, down to 12.
An hour and 10 minutes is getting late for some people.
Yes. Yeah, thanks again, everyone, for joining us. I appreciate that we're able to do this every month. And yeah, I really appreciate you all taking your time.
Right.
Bye.
Yep. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Adios.